The moment the referee announced the beginning of combat, Commander Vex charged forward like an angry bull. His strategy was simple and brutal. Use his massive size and 4 powerful arms to crush the small human before she could do anything clever at all. 4 of his arms spread wide as he rushed toward Lieutenant Kim Hana. He planned to grab her in a crushing bear hug that would end the fight in seconds. His purple skin had turned almost black, and his 4 eyes glowed with confident anticipation. But Hana had been expecting exactly this kind of attack. At the very last second, she dropped low to the ground and rolled smoothly between his legs. As Vex's momentum carried him forward, she came up behind him while he was still trying to figure out where she had gone. Before he could turn around, Hana struck with perfect precision at a nerve cluster just below his left shoulder. It was a pressure point that most species shared, and she had studied Kralian anatomy carefully. Vex's entire left side went numb instantly, and he let out a roar that shook the holodeck walls. He stumbled forward off balance and confused. The massive alien spun around to face her, but his left arm was hanging useless at his side. The crowd of alien spectators fell completely silent. Nobody had expected the tiny human to land the first hit, let alone disable one of the commander. Powerful arms, lucky shot. Vex snarled as he shook his left shoulder, trying to restore feeling to the numb limb. That will not happen again. It was no longer a lucky shot, and everyone in the holodeck was starting to realize it. Hana moved with fluid grace, staying just out of reach while Vex tried to corner her. His size and strength were impressive, but they also made him slower and less agile. When Vex tried to use his 3 remaining arms to box her in, Hana simply was not there anymore. She flowed like water around his attacks, using footwork that made her seem to disappear and reappear in different spots. The alien commander was getting frustrated. He had never fought an opponent who moved like this. Most enemies either tried to match his strength, which never worked, or ran away in fear. This human was doing neither. Vex changed his approach and tried to fight more like a trained boxer, using his upper 2 arms to punch while keeping his lower arms ready to grab. But Hana had watched hours of recordings showing how Kralians fought. She knew all their standard techniques when he threw a combination of heavy punches. With his upper arms, Hana did something unexpected. Instead of backing away or trying to dodge, she stepped inside his reach where his long arms could not generate full power. From this close range, she landed 3 quick strikes to his ribs and a sharp elbow to his solar plexus. The blows were precisely targeted at the gaps in his natural armor, where the bone plates did not overlap. Vex staggered backward, genuinely hurt for the first time. The alien spectators were no longer laughing. Some of them looked worried, while others seemed confused about what they were seeing. "This is impossible," one alien whispered to another. "Humans are supposed to be." Weak Hana was not trying to overpower the massive Kralian warrior. Instead, she was taking him apart piece by piece like a mechanic disassembling a machine. Every strike hit exactly where it would do the most damage, while avoiding the areas where his natural armor was strongest. Vex charged again, this time trying to use all 4 arms to pin her against the energy barrier. But Hana had trained for years to fight multiple opponents at once. She twisted away from his grappling attempts and used a basic martial arts technique to throw him over her hip. 300 pounds of alien warrior crashed to the holodeck floor with enough force to make the entire room shake. Vex rolled to his feet quickly, but he was breathing hard now and his confidence was starting to crack. The crowd was completely silent now. This was not going the way anyone had expected. A few aliens were actually placing new bets on the human, which would have been unthinkable just minutes earlier. "You fight like a coward," Vex growled as he circled her more carefully. "Using tricks instead of honest strength. Fight like a human." Hana replied simply. What happened next would be remembered and talked about throughout the Galactic Council for years to come. Vex abandoned all technique and training in his anger and frustration. He charged like a wild animal. With all 4 arms reaching for her, Hana waited until the absolute last possible moment, then dropped to the ground and swept his legs with a perfect martial arts technique. As the massive alien crashed down, she moved with lightning speed. She wrapped her legs around his right arm and applied what martial artists called an armbar. It was a leverage technique that used body positioning and physics to control an opponent regardless of size or strength. Vex tried desperately to use his other three arms to break free, but Hana had positioned herself perfectly. Every movement he made only tightened her hold on his arm. Within seconds, she had the giant warrior completely immobilized. The silence in the holodeck was so complete that everyone could die. Hear Vex's heavy breathing and the small sounds Hana made as she adjusted her grip yield. She said quietly, but her voice carried clearly through the silent room. Never. Vex roared and tried to pull free. Hana applied more pressure, and there was an audible, popping sound as the alien elbow joint reached its breaking point. Vex's roar of defiance became a scream of genuine pain. Yield. She repeated, her voice still calm and controlled. The Kralian commander struggled for a few more seconds, but the pain was becoming unbearable, and he realized that she could break his arm completely if she chose to. I yield. He gasped out the words, barely audible. The referee immediately called for the end of combat, but for several long seconds nobody moved. The silence stretched on as hundreds of alien spectators tried to process what they had just witnessed. Finally, Hana released her hold and stood up smoothly. She looked around at the stunned faces filling the holodeck, then walked over to where Vex was sitting, on the floor cradling his injured arm. Good fight, Commander, she said with genuine respect and offered him her hand to help him stand. Vex stared up at her with a mixture of pain, confusion, and something that might have been respect. How, he asked, simply humans do not win by being stronger than our enemies, Hana explained as she helped the massive alien to his feet. We win by being smarter. The alien commander looked at her with his 4 eyes, and for the first time since she had arrived on the station there was no contempt or dismissal in his gaze. You studied my people, he said. I studied everything about Kralian fighting techniques, anatomy, weaknesses, and psychology. Hana replied, I knew exactly how you would attack, and I prepared for it. But you are so small, Vex said, still trying to understand what had happened. Size is just one factor in combat, Hana said. Speed, technique, timing, and intelligence can overcome raw physical power if you know how to use them properly. The crowd of aliens was finally starting to move and talk again, but their conversations were different now. They were no longer laughing at humans or dismissing them as weak. Instead, they were looking at Hana with something approaching awe. One of the Centaurian officers approached. Them remarkable, he said to Hana. I have never seen fighting techniques like that before. Where did you learn such skills? Humans have been developing combat systems for thousands of years, Hana replied. We had to learn how to defeat bigger, stronger opponents because that was the only way we could survive on our home planet. As word of the fight spread beyond the holodeck, the entire station began to buzz with excitement and confusion. Everything that the aliens thought they knew about humans had just been turned upside down. The small, weak species that everyone had been dismissing and ignoring had just proven that they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The news of what had happened in Holodeck 3 spread through Station Alpha 7 like wildfire. Within an hour, every single being on the massive space station knew that Lieutenant Kim Hana had defeated Commander Vex in single combat. The story grew bigger, with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. A small human female had beaten a trained Kralian warrior. The alien crew members who had witnessed the fight were still in shock. They gathered in small groups throughout the station talking, in hushed voices about what they had seen. Some of them kept shaking their heads as if they could not believe their own memories. Did you see how fast she moved? One of the blue 6-armed aliens asked his companion. She was like smoke or water, always, where he was not expecting. The technique she used to throw him was incredible. Another alien added, I have never seen anything like it. How can someone so small generate so much force? But it was not just the physical techniques that amazed them, it was the way Hana had approached the entire fight. She had studied her opponent, prepared for his attacks, and used his own strengths against him. It was a completely different way of thinking about combat. Commander Vex spent 2 hours in the medical bay getting his injured arm treated. The advanced healing technology quickly repaired the damage, but his pride would take much longer to heal. When he finally emerged, he found that everything had changed. His own crew members looked at him differently. Now they still respected him as their commander, but there was something new in their eyes, a recognition that perhaps Kralians were not as superior as they had always believed. Lieutenant Hana was in her quarters writing her report when Sergeant Park Do-hyun burst through the door. His face was a mixture of excitement, worry, and disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" he asked. "I won a fight," Hana replied calmly as she continued typing. "You did not just win a fight," Do-hyun said, pacing back and forth. "You changed everything. The aliens are talking about nothing else. Some of them are actually scared of humans." "Now good?" Hana said without looking up from her computer. "Maybe now they will think twice before pushing us around within hours." The effects of the fight began to ripple throughout the station. Corporal Lee Minho was attending his usual engineering meeting when something unexpected happened. Instead of ignoring him like they always did, the alien engineers actually asked for his opinion. "What do you think about the power distribution problem, Minho?" the lead engineer asked. "We have been discussing it for an hour, but cannot find a good solution." Minho was so surprised he almost fell out of his chair. He had been sitting quietly in the corner, expecting to be ignored as usual. But now all the aliens were looking at him with genuine interest. "Well," he said carefully, "I think the problem is in the secondary relay system. If we reroute the power flow through the backup channels, we could increase efficiency by 15%. The aliens listened carefully to his suggestion and spent the next 20 minutes implementing his solution. When it worked perfectly, they all turned to look at him with new respect. Private Cho Yuna had a similar experience when she reported for her flight assignment. Instead of giving her the usual patrol duty in an old broken ship, the flight commander assigned her to the newest fighter in the squadron. "You are the best pilot we have," the alien commander admitted grudgingly. "It is time we started using your skills properly." All over the station, humans were discovering that their alien colleagues were treating them differently. The casual dismissals and rude behavior had stopped. Overnight aliens who had never spoken to humans before were now approaching them with questions and requests for help. The change was not just in how the aliens treated humans, it was in how they thought about humans. The fight had shattered their assumptions about human weakness and incompetence. Now they were curious about what other capabilities humans might possess. Dr. Sarah Chen, the station xenobiologist, found herself flooded with requests from alien researchers. They wanted to study human physiology, combat techniques, and problem-solving abilities. The very traits that had been dismissed as weaknesses were now seen as fascinating advantages. "How do humans develop such effective fighting systems?" one researcher asked. "We have always believed that physical strength was the most important factor in combat. Humans had to learn to overcome stronger opponents." Chen explained, "Because we were not the biggest or strongest species on our planet, we developed techniques that relied on intelligence, speed, and precision instead of raw power." The researchers took detailed notes and asked hundreds of questions. They were beginning to understand that humans represented something unique in the galaxy, a species that had turned apparent disadvantages into overwhelming strengths. Meanwhile, Commander Vex was struggling with his own thoughts and feelings. The defeat had been humiliating, but it had also been educational. He had always believed that Kralian superiority was based on their natural physical advantages. Now he was forced to reconsider everything. He found himself studying the recordings of the fight over and over again. Each time he watched, he noticed something new about Hana techniques, the way she had analyzed his fighting style, the precision of her attacks, the perfect timing of her movements. She had not just beaten him through luck or accident. She had studied his species, identified their weaknesses, and developed a specific strategy to exploit them. It was the work of a true warrior, even though it was completely different from Kralian ideas about warfare. 3 days after the fight, Vex made a decision that surprised everyone. He called for a meeting with all the human officers on the station. When they gathered in the conference room, they expected another confrontation or perhaps some kind of punishment. Instead, Vex did something that no one had anticipated. He apologized. "I have called this meeting to address my behavior toward human personnel," he said formally. "My actions were inappropriate and beneath the standards expected of a Galactic Council officer." The humans exchanged surprised glances. They had never heard a Kralian apologize for anything. "More importantly," Vex continued, "I have learned something valuable about humanity. I assumed that because humans lack certain physical advantages, they were weak. I was completely wrong. He looked directly at Hana's strength. Comes in many forms. Lieutenant Kim has shown me that intelligence, adaptability, and tactical thinking are just as valuable as physical power, perhaps more valuable. The alien commander paused and seemed to be struggling with his words. Your species has survived and thrived, not despite your physical limitations, but because of how you have overcome them. This is not weakness. This is the mark of true warriors. Over the following days, the changes became more dramatic. Humans were included in planning meetings where their input was not only welcomed, but actively sought. Their living quarters were upgraded to match those of other species. Their duty assignments became more varied and interesting. But the most significant change was in attitude. The other species began to study humans with genuine scientific curiosity. They wanted to understand how such a physically unremarkable species had managed to become so successful. The station combat training facilities saw a surge of interest as aliens requested lessons in human fighting techniques. The instructors were amazed by the complexity and effectiveness of human martial arts systems. These techniques are incredible. One instructor observed, they use physics and leverage to overcome size and strength advantages. Why did no other species develop similar methods? Because no other species needed to, an alien anthropologist replied. Most species either dominated their environments through natural advantages or they went extinct. Humans are unique because they learned to succeed despite having no natural advantages. Word of the events on Station Alpha 7 began to spread beyond the station itself. Reports reached the Galactic Council and other member species throughout the Alliance. Suddenly everyone wanted to know more about these remarkable humans. Earth Command received requests from dozens of species asking for human military advisors, combat instructors, and tactical consultants. The species that had previously dismissed humans as junior partners were now competing for human expertise. Admiral Johnson called Hana personally to congratulate her on her success, Lieutenant. Your actions have changed how the entire galaxy views humanity. He said, we are no longer seen as the weak newcomers to the Alliance. We are recognized as equals with unique and valuable capabilities. But perhaps the most important change was in how humans saw themselves. The victory had given them confidence and pride. They no longer accepted second-class treatment or apologized for their perceived weaknesses. They began to understand that being human was not a disadvantage to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. Their adaptability, intelligence, and determination were not consolation prizes for lacking physical power. They were the very qualities that made humans special. The fight in Holodeck 3 had lasted less than 5 minutes, but its effects would reshape human-alien relations for generations to come. The silence in the corridor was so thick it felt like breathing underwater. Commander Vex towered over Lieutenant Kim Hana. His 4 massive arms crossed in front of his chest. His purple skin had darkened to an almost black color, which everyone knew meant a Kralian was ready for battle. Mistake, he laughed, and the sound echoed off the metal walls like thunder. The only mistake here is allowing weak humans to pretend they are real officers. You should be cleaning floors, not walking around with fake authority. Several alien crew members had gathered behind Vex, and they nodded their heads in agreement. Some of them made sounds that might have been laughter in their own languages. They had been waiting for someone to finally put these annoying humans in their proper place. Sergeant Park Do-hyun felt his muscles tense and his hands formed fists. He wanted to defend Hana, but he also knew that starting a fight would only make things worse for all the humans on the station. But when he looked at Hana, he saw something in her eyes that made him pause. According to Galactic Council regulations, Hana said, her voice steady and calm, physical assault on a fellow officer is grounds for immediate disciplinary action. As the human liaison officer, I have the authority to file formal charges against you. Beck stepped even closer to her, using his enormous height to try to scare her. His 4 eyes glowed with anger, and his breathing became deeper and louder. File whatever papers you want, little human. The Council will always side with me. We Kralians are warriors, not weak creatures who hide behind rules and regulations. You are absolutely right about one thing, Hana replied, and that dangerous smile returned to her face. Kralians are known throughout the galaxy as great warriors. Your people have a proud history of combat that I genuinely respect. In fact, I believe your own military laws allow disputes to be settled through single combat. Do they not? The corridor became even quieter, if that was possible. Several aliens looked at each other with confusion and surprise. They had not expected this conversation to take such a strange turn. Commander Vex's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the small human woman more carefully. "You actually challenging me to fight human?" he asked slowly. "I am formally invoking Article 47 of the Kralian Military Honor Code," Hana said in an official tone. "You have attacked me without justification, questioned my abilities as an officer, and dishonored me in front of witnesses. By your own ancient laws, I have the right to demand satisfaction through single combat." The alien crew members looked absolutely shocked. In Kralian culture, only proven warriors with great skill and courage ever issued such challenges. The idea that this tiny human female would dare use their most sacred combat traditions was almost impossible to believe. "You cannot possibly be serious," Vex said, though his voice carried less confidence than it had moments. "Before I am completely serious," Hana replied. "Unless, of course, you would prefer to publicly apologize for your behavior and face the disciplinary board instead. I am sure the council would be very interested to learn that a Kralian commander physically assaulted a human officer during a routine inspection." Commander Vex found himself trapped in a situation he had not expected. If he backed down now, he would lose respect in front of his crew, and word would spread throughout the entire station that he had been intimidated by a human. If he accepted the challenge and somehow lost to this small female, the humiliation would destroy his career. But if he won easily as he expected, he would prove once and for all that Kralians were superior to humans. "Very well," he said, finally his voice booming through the corridor. "I accept your challenge. The combat will take place in 1 hour in holodeck. 3. You may choose your preferred weapon hand-to-hand combat," Hana said immediately. "No weapons, no armor, no technological assistance, just pure skill against skill." Vex's confidence returned in a rush. He outweighed this human by more than 100 pounds and had 4 powerful arms to her 2 pathetic ones. This fight would be over in less than a minute, and everyone would see what happened when humans tried to act tough. "Agreed," he rumbled. "When I defeat you easily, you will publicly apologize to me and request an immediate transfer off this station. You will also recommend that no more humans be given officer positions. And when I win," Hana said calmly, "you will treat all human personnel on this station with the proper respect they deserve as fellow officers. You will follow all regulations regarding equal treatment, and you will include humans in all relevant decision-making processes." Deal, Vex said, extending one of his enormous hands as they shook hands to seal the agreement. Dohyun leaned close to Hana. "Are you completely insane?" he whispered. "He is twice your size and weight and has 4 arms to your 2. Trust me." Hana whispered back with a smile that was genuinely warm for the first time. "I know exactly what I am doing." Word of the challenge spread through Station Alpha 7 faster than a computer virus. Within 10 minutes, every single person on the station knew that the human liaison officer had challenged Commander Vex to single combat. Aliens were making bets on the outcome, and the odds were heavily in favor of the Kralian commander. Most humans thought Hana had lost. Her mind, Corporal Lee Minho found her in the human quarters and stared at her like she had grown a second head lieutenant. "With all due respect, what are you thinking? Vex is a trained Kralian warrior. They literally breed their people for fighting." "I know exactly what I am doing," Hana said as she began stretching her muscles. "Trust me on this one, but he has 4 arms." Minho protested. "His skin is naturally armored. He weighs twice what you do. His reflexes are enhanced because his home planet has much stronger gravity than Earth. This is not a fair fight." "Fair fights are for sporting events," Hana replied calmly. "This is about proving a point." Private Cho Yuna pushed through the crowd of worried humans that had gathered. "Lieutenant, I accessed the station database and pulled up everything about Kralian fighting techniques. They use overwhelming force and multiple attack angles. Their whole strategy depends on ending fights quickly before opponents can adapt." "Excellent research," Hana said, approvingly. "What else did you find?" They are not used to fighting opponents who are faster or more agile than them. Their combat training focuses on direct confrontation. They do not practice much against evasive or unconventional tactics. Perfect, Hana said. Now I need everyone to listen carefully. No matter what happens in that holodeck, nobody interferes. This has to be a clean fight or it will not count. What if he seriously hurts you? Do-hyun asked with genuine worry in his voice. Then you make sure every human in the galaxy knows that their liaison officer died fighting for their dignity and respect. But do not worry about that because it is not going to happen. The crowd of humans was starting to feel a little more confident. Maybe their lieutenant actually knew something they did not. Maybe she really did have a chance against the alien warrior. As the time for the fight approached, more and more aliens gathered near holodeck 3. It seemed like the entire crew wanted to watch the human get destroyed. Everyone was expecting a quick and brutal demonstration of why humans were the weakest species in the Alliance. Commander Vex arrived early and spent time warming up his forearms and practicing his combat stances. His supporters cheered and made encouraging noises in their various languages. He looked like an unstoppable force of nature. When Hana arrived, she looked impossibly small next to the massive Kralian. The contrast was so extreme that some aliens actually laughed out loud. A few even suggested stopping the fight because it seemed too unfair, but Hana walked calmly into the holodeck with her head held high. She had changed into simple workout clothes that would allow maximum movement. Her hair was tied back securely and her hands were wrapped with protective tape. She looked ready. The holographic environment activated and created a traditional Kralian combat arena with energy barriers to contain the fight. The circular space was about 30 feet across, with a smooth floor and bright lighting. Last chance to surrender. Human Vex called out, his voice echoing through the holodeck. I do not want to cause you permanent injury. Thank you for your concern. Hana replied politely. But I will have to respectfully decline your offer. The referee, a neutral officer from the Centaurian species, stepped forward. Combat will continue until one participant surrenders, is knocked unconscious, or I determine the fight must end. No weapons, no outside help. Are both fighters ready? Both combatants nodded. Then let the challenge begin. The morning star went completely dark, like a ghost ship floating in the emptiness of space. All the lights turned off. The heating system stopped working. The air recycling slowed down to barely breathe. The only sounds were the quiet hum of life, support running on emergency power, and the soft breathing of scared alien students. Hana sat at the pilot controls, her hands steady on the manual steering system. No computers could help her now. Computer systems made noise that enemy sensors could. Detect everything had to be done by hand, using only her eyes and her instincts to guide the ship through the dangerous debris field. The alien students gathered around her station, watching in amazement as she piloted their ship through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. Chunks of twisted metal floated past the windows, some so close they could touch the hull. The remains of ancient starships created a maze of hiding spots, but also deadly obstacles that could crush their small vessel. The Thraxian student clicked his mouthparts very quietly. How do you see the safe path through all this wreckage? The pieces are moving and spinning. Everything changes every second. Hana kept her eyes focused on the space ahead of them. Her hands made tiny adjustments to their course, avoiding collision by mere centimeters. I do not calculate the math in my head. I feel where the ship needs to go. Humans call it gut instinct, but really it is pattern recognition working faster than thinking. Guided them past a huge piece of hull plating that was tumbling end over end. The metal chunk was as big as their entire ship, but Hana slipped around it like water flowing around a rock. Her movements were smooth and confident, as if she had practiced this exact maneuver 1,000 times before. Behind them, the Velkari warship Death Edge continued its slow patrol pattern. The enemy crew was getting impatient, waiting for a surrender message. They had sent 4 demands already, each one more angry than the last. Soon they would realize that something was wrong, but by then the Morning Star would be in position. Commander Park watched Hana work with growing amazement. He had seen the best pilots in the galaxy fly through asteroid fields and debris zones, but none of them moved with this kind of natural grace. It was like watching a bird navigate through a forest or a fish swim through coral reefs. The human girl seemed to know exactly where every piece of wreckage would be before it got there. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" the commander asked quietly. "My home planet has 3 moons." Hana replied without taking her eyes off the navigation. "The gravity fields create moving debris clouds that change every day if you want. To travel between cities, you have to learn to read the patterns children start practicing when they are 8 years old." The Zephyrian student flickered with curiosity. "What happens if you make a mistake?" "You die," Hana said simply. "So you learn not to make mistakes." A massive piece of engine wreckage drifted directly into their path. The chunk of metal was spinning slowly, creating a wall of death that seemed to block every possible route. Hana studied it for exactly 3 seconds, then made a decision that terrified everyone watching. She accelerated directly toward the spinning wreckage. The Martok student growled in fear. "Human, what are you doing?" "Trust me," Hana said calmly. At the last possible second, she rolled their ship 90 degrees and slipped through a gap between 2 spinning pieces of metal. The gap was barely wider than their ship, and it only existed for about 2 seconds, but Hana had seen it coming and timed their approach perfectly. They emerged on the other side unharmed while the alien students sat in stunned silence. They had just watched their human pilot thread a needle while blindfolded and riding a roller coaster. "How did you know that gap would be there?" Commander Park asked. "The spin rate was constant and the debris pieces were locked in gravitational resonance," Hana explained. "Simple orbital mechanics. Once you know the pattern, you can predict where the openings will appear." She made it sound easy, but everyone on the bridge knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The mathematical calculations required to predict that gap would have taken a supercomputer several minutes to process. But Hana had done it all in her head in less than 3 seconds. The Morning Star continued its silent journey through the debris field, using every piece of wreckage as cover. Hana found paths that did not exist on any navigation chart. She squeezed their ship through spaces that sensors said were too small. She avoided Velkari. Patrol sweeps by hiding behind chunks of metal at exactly the right moments. The enemy ship grew larger and larger in their viewports until it filled the entire sky. The Death Edge was massive and intimidating, with weapon turrets that could vaporize, planets and armor plating thick enough to stop nuclear missiles. But Hana was not intimidated. She had found its weakness, and now she was going to exploit it. Approaching the target zone, she whispered. The Morning Star reached the aft section of the Velkari warship, sliding into the sensor shadow like a ghost ship returning to haunt its killers. The damage detection arrays created a blind spot just large enough for a small vessel to approach without being noticed. Hana brought them to a complete stop, floating in the void only 50 meters from the enemy hull. Here in the shadow of the great warship, everything was quiet and still. The metal surface of the Death Edge stretched away in all directions like a gray landscape of armor, plating, and weapon mounts. Emergency lights blinked slowly along maintenance corridors. The soft glow from portholes showed that the enemy crew was going about their normal duties, completely unaware that humans had arrived. "Now what?" Commander Park asked in the barest whisper. Hana was already putting on her spacesuit, checking her equipment pack, and testing her magnetic clamps. "Now I go make some new friends and teach them about human cooking." "Absolutely not, Cadet. You are not boarding that ship alone." "I am not going there to fight the entire crew," Hana said patiently as she sealed her helmet. "I am going to the kitchen to start dinner. Human food has been ending wars and making friends for thousands of years. Time to show the Velkari what they have been missing." She held up her equipment pack, which seemed much too heavy for normal infiltration gear. The other students could see cooking supplies and spice containers, mixed in with electronic tools and magnetic clamps. "Humans win wars with friendship, food, and kindness," Hana explained. "Much more effective than weapons and much harder to defend against." Before anyone could stop her, she activated the airlock and stepped out into the cold vacuum of space, carrying supplies that would change everything. Part 5. The New Galaxy, 6 months after the fight that changed everything. Station Alpha 7 had become completely different from what it used to be. The transformation was so complete, that new arrivals could hardly believe the stories about how humans had once been treated. Lieutenant Kim Hana walked through the corridors that had once felt hostile and unwelcoming. Now aliens of all species nodded respectfully when they saw her. Some even stopped to ask her opinions about various matters or to request her help with problems. The human quarters had been completely renovated and were now equal in quality to those of any other species. The cramped rooms with no windows had been replaced with spacious accommodations that actually had better views than many alien quarters, but the physical changes were nothing compared to the changes in attitude and respect. Commander Vex had kept every promise he made after losing the fight. Human officers were now included in all important meetings, and their suggestions were not only heard but often implemented. The Kralian commander had become one of the strongest advocates for human inclusion in decision-making. More surprisingly, Vex had also become something like a friend to Hana. He often sought her advice on tactical problems and had even started learning some human fighting techniques. He claimed it was to better understand his former opponent, but everyone knew he had genuine respect for human methods. The most dramatic example of change came during a crisis 3 months after the fight. A group of pirates had attacked a civilian transport ship near the station and were holding the passengers hostage. The alien commanders had spent hours arguing about the best way to respond. Finally, Vex turned to the human officers. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. Corporal Lee Minho, who was now the lead tactical analyst, studied the situation carefully. "The pirates have taken position in an asteroid field where our large ships cannot maneuver effectively, but their position also limits their escape routes." Private Cho Yuna, who had been promoted to squadron leader, added, "If we use small fast fighters, we can approach from multiple angles and force them into a trap. They will have to surrender or risk being destroyed." The plan they developed was typically human, clever, adaptive, and focused on using intelligence rather than brute force. It worked perfectly. The pirates were captured without any harm to the hostages, and the alien commanders were impressed once again by human tactical thinking. Word of human successes continued to spread throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council received reports from dozens of stations and outposts about the valuable contributions human personnel were making. Species that had never paid attention to humans before were now requesting human advisors and specialists. The Centaurian Republic formally requested a partnership with Earth to develop new combat training programs. The Altarian Federation wanted human engineers to help design more efficient spacecraft. The mighty Draconian Empire actually asked for human diplomats to help negotiate a peace treaty with their ancient enemies. Each success built on the previous ones, creating a snowball effect that transformed humanity's status in the galactic community. The species that had been seen as weak newcomers were now recognized as valuable allies with unique capabilities. Dr. Sarah Chen published a research paper about human adaptability that became required reading at the Galactic Academy. Her work explained how humans had developed their remarkable problem-solving abilities through millions of years of overcoming challenges on their dangerous home planet. Humans are the ultimate generalist, Chen wrote in her paper. While other species evolved specific advantages that allowed them to dominate their environments, humans evolved the ability to adapt to any environment. This makes them incredibly valuable in situations that require creative solutions. The paper was translated into dozens of alien languages and sparked a galaxy-wide interest in human culture, history, and capabilities. Suddenly, everyone wanted to understand how this remarkable species had developed such effective survival strategies. Back on Station Alpha 7, the changes had become permanent and irreversible. The humans who had once been treated as second-class citizens were now respected members of the community. Their opinions were valued, their skills were utilized, and their contributions were recognized. Sergeant Park Do-hyun had been promoted to lieutenant and was now the deputy station security chief. He often worked directly with Commander Vex on important security matters. Their partnership had become so effective that other stations were studying their methods. One evening, Do-hyun found Hana in her office reviewing reports from Earth Command. She had been promoted to commander herself and was now responsible for human personnel on 3 different stations. "Hard to believe how much has changed," he said, settling into a chair. "Sometimes I can barely believe it myself," Hana replied. But then I remember that we did not really change anything. We just showed them who we always were. The report she was reading contained exciting news. Earth had been invited to join the Galactic Council Inner Circle, a group of the most influential species in the Alliance. Only 12 species had ever been granted this honor, and humans were now the 13th. More importantly, the invitation specifically mentioned human contributions to tactical thinking, problem-solving, and adaptive strategies. The galaxy had finally recognized that humans brought something unique and valuable to the table. The transformation was not limited to military and technical matters. Human culture was also gaining popularity throughout the galaxy. Human music, art, and literature were being translated and shared across dozens of worlds. Alien students were studying human history and philosophy. Human restaurants had opened on major alien worlds, serving Earth cuisine to curious alien customers. Human entertainment programs were being broadcast across the galaxy. Human fashion was influencing alien clothing design, but perhaps the most significant change was in how humans saw themselves. The victory on Station Alpha 7 had given humanity confidence to embrace their unique nature instead of trying to imitate other species human. Colonies throughout the galaxy began to develop their own distinct identities. Human explorers pushed into previously unknown regions of space. Human scientists made breakthrough discoveries by approaching problems in ways no other species had considered. The fight that had lasted less than 5 minutes had triggered a renaissance of human achievement and recognition. A year after the fight, Hannah received a message that made her smile. A young human girl from Earth had written to thank her. The girl explained that she had been bullied at school by alien classmates who called humans weak and stupid. But after hearing about what happened on Station Alpha 7, the girl had stood up to her bullies. She told them that humans were not weak, but different, and that being different was actually a strength. The bullying had stopped, and some of the alien children had even become her friends. Stories like this reached Hannah from all over the galaxy. Young humans who had once felt ashamed of their species were now proud to be human. They understood that they did not need to be the strongest or fastest to be valuable, they just needed to be themselves. The Galactic Council officially recognized humans as a Class 1 species, meaning they were considered equals to the founding members of the Alliance. Humans were granted seats on important committees, and their representatives were consulted on major galactic decisions. Commander Vex was promoted to Admiral and given command of an entire fleet. But before he left Station Alpha 7, he made sure to personally thank Hannah for the lesson she had taught him. "You showed me that true strength comes from the mind, not just the body," he said during their farewell meeting. That lesson made me a better warrior and a better leader. As Hannah watched his ship depart, she reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was no longer a place where humans had to prove they belonged. They had earned their place through intelligence, courage, and determination. The story of the human lieutenant who defeated an alien commander in single combat had become legend. But the real victory was much larger. It was the recognition that every species had something unique to contribute, and that diversity made the Alliance stronger. Humans had finally found their place in the galaxy not as imitators of other species, but as themselves. And that made all the difference.